All right, guys, here we go. Continuing with Chapter 5, and this time around we're going to look at Sections 4 and 5 of your notes. Rating services. Ratings were originally intended only to provide information for advertisers that were curious about audience size. It looked at raw data. It looked at number of eyeballs, number of earlobes. It didn't really get into the nuances of what eyeballs and earlobes were actually involved. Once the statistical reliability of ratings data became accepted, programmers began using the audience measurement to gauge the success of their decisions. The more people that tune in, the more successful you were. Broadcast revenues, programs, stations, and individual careers depend on these audience ratings, because if you've got lots and lots of people that are tuning in, that means that you can command more for your advertising rates, which means you're more successful, which means that people that help make the decisions to put those shows into places they were and their successful popularity resulted from that, well, they enjoy nice long careers. Those that don't, well, they don't. In an attempt to find a better way to measure the effectiveness of advertising, Nielsen Catalina offered a new model for measuring TV audiences based on viewer-purchaser behavior. So it's starting to change the way that we're putting out measurements of how effective programming and therefore advertising is going to be, which is going to be of more interest to the advertiser, because again, the advertiser doesn't care about having an ad on TV. They care about reaching customers that are going to buy their products and services. In the meantime, many advertisers want demographic data so they can match their prospective customers to their commercial messages for the same reasons we just talked about. Content power ratings, or CPRs, not only count TV viewers, but they also add in social media mentions. And this is a way for both the programmers and the advertisers to be able to get a better sense of what is happening with their programs and content and all those sorts of things. Because if your particular show is creating a certain amount of social media buzz, you can directly see that by logging in and seeing the hashtags or seeing how many people like a certain page or are talking about certain aspects of a show, and whether they're talking about them positively or negatively. It's much more qualitative in the data and can help to influence whether or not the show is doing well in the eyes of the network, in the eyes of the advertisers, because, well, any news is good news. And if people are tuning in to check out what's going on or follow up on things or talking about it, that means people are seeing it and they're consuming the content. They're there. Which programs deliver the ideal reach and frequency of viewing by their target markets at the best possible price is what advertisers want to know. In other words, they want to get the most bang for their buck. They want to try to reach as many people that are within their target audience, their target demographic, those that need that product or service that they want to sell to. That's what advertisers want to know. How many teenage girls are going to tune in to this boy band show so that we can sell them the latest in makeup or accessories or music or whatever else they want to push. Politics and ratings. Legislators use TV because it reaches such enormous numbers of people. They also use cable and social media because of its ability to reach certain types of audiences. Now, we're seeing from the TV side, not so much of a power these days as much as social media has been. But TV is still a very powerful tool because the news aspect of broadcast television still has a pretty powerful way of influencing our understanding of what is going on in the political realm. And of course, the cable news networks have their share and their way of doing that as well. And it, in the minds of many politicians, is advantageous to play ball with these news outlets for them to be able to get on camera and talk about their positions on how they feel about certain issues or on the actions of other politicians and that sort of thing. But we're really starting to see, especially in a world where there is a lot of division in the way that we feel about certain issues as it relates to government, that you can very quickly get an audience on your side or against you based on how media portrays the events that are happening. Television services. Nielsen covers the entire United States continuously for network ratings using a separate sample of 12,000 households with people meters, and we talked about that in the last video. Sweeps are measurements of audiences for all local television stations. These happen 4 times a year, providing local television reports. And what happens is that during these sweeps, that is when these measurements that are collected help to set the advertising rates for television stations. So in sweeps, all the TV stations want to do as well as they possibly can to get as high of ratings they possibly can so they can set their advertising rates as high as they possibly can. A ratings period consists of 4 sequential weeks of data reported week by week and averaged for the month. So you'll see numbers that come out pretty much on a monthly basis that talk about how well a particular station or a particular network is doing. Stations in a market contract individually with Nielsen for a ratings book. So television stations have to pay Nielsen for the rights to be able to use the data that Nielsen compiles. And a lot of times you'll see that stations will use that to say that they're the highest rated on a certain night for television or during a certain time period. Local stations like to use these numbers to point out how well they're doing with their newscast, that they're the most watched 6 p.m. newscast or the most watched morning news show. As far as national ratings go, 1 ratings point represents the viewing of about 116 million TV households, with each household representing 2.6 people. And you can read more about Nielsen in the textbook. Take a look at figure 5.5, and it will shed some light a little bit more on Nielsen and its doings. When you read the stuff in the book about radio services, they will use the company name Arbitron. Arbitron no longer really exists. Arbitron was acquired by Nielsen. So just know nowadays that the stuff that is attributed to Arbitron in the textbook is now handled by Nielsen Audio. Paper diaries are used in all but 48 of the top 52 radio markets, which use PPM, personal people meters. As far as data collection goes, continuous radio measurement is happening more and more, so that we see that ratings are collected 48 weeks out of the year in larger markets and 16 weeks a year in smaller markets. So you're seeing those numbers compiled much more on a regular basis, so that the numbers that you see are generally going to be rather recent and reflective of what's actually happening with radio listening right now. Nationwide radio, Radar 108 reports on the size and demographics composition of 50 radio networks, and this is reported for the top 10, 25, and 50 markets as determined by the market size by Nielsen Audio. Keep in mind that radio markets are not the same as television markets. So, for example, we are in the Raleigh-Durham-Fayetteville television market, those of us that live in Harnett, Lee, and Chatham counties. But we are segmented in that the Raleigh radio market is different from the Fayetteville radio market. Radio rating services include those listed on your screen, and if you want to learn more, you can see links to different rating services. You'll also find an article on online radio measurement and how that works, and I would encourage you to check those out. Okay, on the screen here, some other sources of metrics that are used for things like online video and video games. One thing still kind of hard to measure in an objective sort of way is social media. There's some companies that are trying to do it, but the ways that the different services put out, the ways that they measure things like views and likes and follows and that sort of thing, there's not a real good apples to apples comparison going from platform to platform to platform. So that's still kind of a work in progress. Now, specialized audiences ratings services can offer more detailed ratings information for specific demographics and for specialized programming. So what we're talking about here is that if you're looking to get measurements on a certain segment of the population or a certain genre of content, there are ways to be able to get measurements for those things as well. Some ratings terminology and measurement computations for you math folks, for you data folks. This section is for you. First off, the DMA, the designated market area, that is the formal name for a television market. The Nielsen Survey Index, or the NSI, includes counties outside of the DMA where substantial viewing of stations inside the DMA occurs in them. So this would be the largest area that certain television stations are going to impact. Some of the examples of this would be if you watch television from what would be considered another TV market, and you don't necessarily live in the confines of that market, you would be part of this Nielsen Survey Index number. So if you live in Harnett County, but you happen to watch television out of Wilmington, then you would be counted in that NSI number. If you live in Chatham County and you watch television that comes from Greensboro, you would be in the NSI numbers for Greensboro in that scenario. It's not necessarily based totally on geography to whatever station you're closest to. The markets are kind of laid out to be specific counties for specific markets. And this will give you a better example of what we mean here. The DMA, the designated market area, each county in the United States is assigned to only one DMA. And you can see different links for different maps in your notes. But we have here maps of the Raleigh-Durham-Fayetteville DMA and the Greensboro, High Point, Winston-Salem DMA, sometimes called the Triad DMA. And you will notice that all of us in the CCCC service area, if you live in Chatham or Lee or Harnett County, you're all part of the Raleigh-Durham-Fayetteville DMA. Even though physically some of you folks in Chatham County may actually live closer to Greensboro and get better reception from Greensboro TV stations, you're part of the Raleigh-Durham market. So you would actually be part of the numbers for the Raleigh DMA. Metro Survey Area, the MSA, that's the term used for radio, or the MRA, the Metro Rating Area for television, that will include only a small number of counties closest to the home city of the DMA. So in the case of Raleigh, for example, the Metro Rating Area would basically be Wake, Durham, and Orange counties, those counties that are specifically part of the triangle, that immediate area of the metro itself. If you live in more rural parts of the market, you wouldn't necessarily be counted in that metro rating area number. Radio stations on the fringe of the metro area are likely to be referred to as part of the TSA, or the total survey area, and that's comparable to NSI area measurements. So in this aspect, you can see on the screen here the examples of how that would be impacted for us, where Harnett and Lee counties would be part of the Fayetteville radio market, but Chatham County is included with the Raleigh-Durham radio market. Now, let's talk about ratings and shares and all that fun stuff. We've talked about these terms in previous chapters, but just as a sense of review. Rating is an estimate of the percentage of the total number of people or households in a population tuned to a specific station or network during a specific time period. So in other words, a rating is going to be a percentage of the entire population of an area. The rating number would include the entire population that lives within the Raleigh-Durham television market, regardless of whether they watch television or not, regardless of whether they can pick up television or not. The rating number would be a percentage of that entire population. The share is an estimate of the percentage of people or households that are actually using radio or television. So the share number is generally going to be larger than the rating number, in that instead of calculating based on everybody that lives in the area, you're only counting people that actually have a television and tune into it, or actually use the radios that they have. So that's going to be a smaller number compared to the population at large. Sales staff use ratings to set advertising rates. Programmers generally use shares in decisions about programs because shares show how well a program does against its competition. So if a program has a 10 share at 8 o'clock on Thursday night, and another show on a competing station has a 15 share in the same time slot, the television station with the 10 share knows that they're not performing as well. Now, these numbers here are more of a combined ratings of all stations or networks in a particular day part, so you're kind of taking a look at a big picture just in general. With these different items here, like HUT, households using television. So that would take a snapshot of, say, a particular time, Thursday nights. And the HUT number, the HUT number, would show how many people are at home watching television, or how many households, rather, using television at that particular time slot. PUT, persons using television, same thing, just counting individual persons instead of counting households. And then PUR, persons using radio, does the same thing for radio. Again, it's considering not just a particular station, but all stations in an area and how many people are consuming at that particular time of day. Some formulas here, you can get better sense of these from your notes. The ways that you determine ratings and shares. A rating is the ratio of households watching a network compared to households with receivers. So that's going to be another way to say that is how many people are watching a particular network in light of how many people live in that area. So it's the rating is the number representative of the percentage of the total population. Share number is only based on a percentage of those actually watching television or actually consuming radio, depending on which one you're looking at. So the households actually watching TV is going to be a smaller number than households with receivers or households in the general population. So, but your share number as a result is going to be larger than your rating number. If you're calculating a share from a rating, you're going to take the rating number, multiply it by 100, and then divide by the HUT number, the number of households using television. Ratings and shares for television are generally representative of households, while radio ratings always represent individuals. That doesn't mean that television doesn't report numbers for individuals, but generally they're going to report based on households. It's just the way that they work for those different industries. AQH, average quarter hour. Program audiences are typically measured in 15-minute intervals. A person is counted in a quarter hour if the television was turned on for a minimum of 5 minutes during the measurement period. So let's say the measurement period is from 8:15 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. If you tuned into a station for at least 5 minutes during that particular time period, you would be counted in that average quarter hour statistic. Cumulative audience, or Cume for short, indicates the number of different people tuned in during a time period. So we're counting unique earlobes and eyeballs. In this case, we're getting a full number of how many unique people, how many distinct individuals are actually participating with that particular programming content or network. In AQH calculation, persons can be counted more than once in a total day part because you're being counted for every 15-minute period that you are consuming content. So if you're watching, say, a show from 8 o'clock to 8:30, you're counted in the 8 o'clock to 8:15 AQH. You're also counted in the 8:15 to 8:30 AQH. Cume is considered to be the reach of the station because it counts how many different persons were tuned in over a period of time. It also reflects the growth or decay of an audience over time. Because again, we're talking about the number of unique persons that are involved with the station or involved with the program. And if that number changes from week to week, it's going to show the growth or the decline of that particular programming or that particular time slot. Cume can also be calculated for a single program over several airings, permitting programmers to estimate the total number of people that watch the particular program. We've talked about this concept in past chapters where some cable networks, for example, are really good at this. If you have a show that airs at 8 p.m., and then the exact same show airs later that evening at 11 p.m., then whether you watched at 8 p.m. or 11 p.m., you would be counted within that Cume total for that particular program. So it's based on program and not so much based on time slot. Measurement of persons that watched a particular commercial are estimated using AQH ratings. So if you're tuned in between 8:15 and 8:30 and you're counted in the AQH number, you would have been considered having watched a commercial that aired during that time. All right, reach and frequency analysis. Let's talk about these two terms. Reach is the net size of the audience that is able to receive a signal. So in reach, we're talking about potential exposure. This is not everybody that is exposed to particular programming content, but they have the potential. So if you live in an area where, say, you put up an antenna to receive broadcast television, and you are able to watch channel 11, but you don't watch channel 11 for one reason or another, you're still considered part of the reach of channel 11. You are part of the potential audience because you have the ability to tune it in and watch if you want to. Frequency is the number of times a person was exposed to a particular commercial message. So if you watched a commercial with a dog playing tennis or something like that, and you saw that same commercial 7 times in an evening, the frequency of that commercial for you is 7. So you were exposed to that commercial message 7 times. That's the frequency number. Programmers usually schedule several interesting programs in succession, trying to create audience flow and achieve a high frequency for advertisers among successive programs appealing to the same viewers. So if you're watching a block of programming, all of which is designed to attract a certain demographic, it's not unlikely that you will see the same commercial play several times within that time slot, because the advertiser recognizes that as part of that target demographic, their viewers are watching that content, so they want to get that message out to them as much as they possibly can to saturate the airwaves and for you to get the product that is associated with that dog playing tennis or whatever the commercial may be. All right, good spot here to take a break, and we will continue on with section 6 of the notes when you hop on with part C of chapter 5.